Welcome back, guys, to Too Many Projects, Not Enough Time. I'm Andrew. This is Timbit. Hey, Timmy. Today, we're going to get away from the Land Rover a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to do a little repair on my DIY wood stove, for better terms, brand name EcoFan, but my wood stove fan. When we were up there last at Christmas time, this one spun like a trooper at full speed, and this one just kind of barely spun. So I thought there's something wrong here. I'll bring it home, we'll find out what it is. And in the process, I found out what the problem is. And as you can see right down here at the base, the glue has come disconnected. So we're going to take this one off. And we're also going to fix today the wires also broke off on the trip back. So we're going to put a new motor on right here, solder that up, back in there, take this side off, re-JB weld the cooler to the hot side, go through a little bit how it works, how these Peltiers work. I'm sure there's another pronunciation somewhere for them, and run through a DIY. So we're going to fix this one, and then using this manifold here, we'll clean it up. We've got some other bits and bobs, some spare motors, some spare parts to mount the motors, and another one of these coolers, CPU coolers. And we're going to make another one on here. It's going to be offset a little bit, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. This one's going to go in the workshop at the lake, on the wood stove there. This one's going to go back in the main cabin at the lake. And they're great at moving the air around without any electricity or anything at all. Purely the heat from the wood stove and the temperature inversion between hot and cold, or the hotter side and cooler side, is how these generate just enough power to run a CD motor. Now in the description below, I'm going to have a couple of links on Amazon where you can find these parts, just to help you start looking if you want to build your own. Now I like to find interesting heavy metal automotive items. We started off with this one here. I found this at the junkyard, or the scrap metal, or as we call it at the lake, the mole. It was laying in the metal scrap pile. It's a twin cylinder cylinder section off a motorbike or something like that. It was just laying on the ground. We sandblasted it up, and then I made these brass plates up to mount these onto it, because in the middle they are hollow, because they are off a motorbike or something like that, and the cylinders ran in there. And then we just find a way to mount the motors, which I like to use these 3/4 inch copper plumbing fittings. The motors actually fit in there fairly snugly. As you just saw that one coming out of there, we just cleaned the thread out just a tiny little bit, and this slips in there real snug, holds them in place like this one, and kind of looks industrial and works. So let's quickly take this side off and see what went wrong with the JB weld. Now you do need a good connection between the hot and cold and the Peltier, or Peltier, however you want to pronounce that, for that to work properly. Now obviously it wasn't working properly because the JB weld didn't adhere to the CPU cooler. Now you can use, as long as you've got a hot side and a cooler side, or a cold side, even though it's not cold, but it's cooler than the bottom, then you can use all sorts of different stuff to get the same result. And there we go. Clearly didn't stick to there, so we'll scuff that up. This one did, so that's all good. So now, let's decide whether we can make use of this one or put a new one on. Here's a little bit of a tech tip. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this, but when you've got a file, there's actually a wire brush designed to brush out and clean out the teeth of a wire brush. And it's a special little wire brush to do that. I'm not sure everyone knows. Most people do, I'm sure, but if you don't, here's a little tech tip. I'm going to use just the edge of this little bit of coarse 80 grit belt sandpaper here, just to give it a little bit rougher surface, both on the bottom of the CPU cooler and the flattened out JB Weld. And then we'll put a thin smear of JB Weld back on. See how it works. Just to give a little bit of roughage for the JB Weld to bite to. JB Weld is a great two-part epoxy resin that is great for bonding metals together. Rolling wire. It's a 50-50 mixture. You got a little point in the end of the cap to break the seal on the end. We're really not going to need much. Pretty close to a 50-50 mix. Mix it up till it's consistent and gray.
Just like that.
All right, and then we'll let that set up. And then once that's set up through the magic television, we'll be back later to finalize the video up, and we'll put all the pieces back in, including soldering on a new motor and reassembling it. So, all right, now the next one will be starting with this exhaust manifold that we took off the little series chassis and engine and running gear that is up at the lake that belongs to the body shell of Ivy, the Series 1 V8 Land Rover. And so let's throw it in the sandblast machine and get her cleaned up. And then as well as that, to mount the fan, what I do, use these copper fittings and then just clean up the threads a little with a die grinder so that the motor can fit in there, as well as groove out one side where the cable's gonna bend back and through, and then that will slide into there. Just real nice and snug, and then that's all you need. So let's get those bits connected together, and also the fan off of here, and this top piece painted the same color as the base.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Alright, enough of that hand stuff. About 30 seconds on the belt sander brought that up a treat. That is really beautiful. Now, I'm not sure it matters which way these go up. They do have writing on one side and not the other, but I have found nowhere any instructions that indicate whether they need to go one way or the other. So I think as long as they're getting a hot side and a cold side, then they just work and generate electricity. So
is that all you got?
Let's begin now.
What up?
we'll let that set up, and then once that's set up, we can put it on, mount it on here, solder the motor on, poke the wires back inside, mount the motor, and we're all done.
Oh, for sure.
Alright guys, there we have it. It is glued, and next day now. So what we're going to do, we're going to bolt it on and then solder on the motors and finish them up. First of all, we have some really small heat shrink, and what heat shrink does, once you finish the solder of the joint, you can slide the heat shrink over that joint and then heat it, and it shrinks tight, creating an insulated barrier. Far better than wrapping electrical tape around it and hoping that stays there forever. So the best thing to do here is strip away just a little bit of the end of the wire. First, by dipping your tips in the flux. spin your wires so they're nice and tight. And these are super thin on these motors. The flux helps keep away all the impurities. Solder here, soldering iron, a little bit of overkill, but it'll do the job. Melt a little solder onto your iron. Pre-coat your wires. Alright, and then, without burning yourself, solder them together. One done. Two done. Let me slide down the heat shrink over the joint using a lighter. Then heat the heat shrink up, and it shrinks down tight, sealing the joint. Now you don't want to heat it up too much, because then you just melt your solder again, your joint will come apart. Okay, then we want to double this wire back and hide it inside of here. That's pretty much how it is. So with just a few scrap pieces laying around, like the exhaust manifold, a piece of brass I have, but you could use aluminum or any sort of steel really. Some JB Weld, the Peltier is key. That's where you get your electricity from. And then a CD motor drive. And once again, down below in the comments, not in the comment, in the description below is a link to some of the items that you'll need on Amazon, just as a starting point for sourcing them if you wanted to do this on your own. A DIY wood stove fan, instead of paying the crazy high prices that they are in the store or online. You can make your own using some cool and funky stuff. And that, my friends, I just got to snug these nuts and bolts up down here, but besides that, there's the new one for the shop. It's a little quirky, it's a little tilted, but hey, kind of like it. It's for the shop, so it doesn't really matter. And I say, it's quirky and it's a Land Rover part, so it kind of fits right in. So we're going to take this one. I'm just going to solder the new motor on the other one, the big one. And then we'll take them on inside, put them on the stove and heat them up and see how they work. Alright guys, there we go. 2 homemade DIY wood stove fans. They're really not hard to make at all. Just a matter of collecting materials. Not sure if I'm a big fan of this little blade here. Kind of like these big ones. We'll give it a whirl, pun intended. We'll give it a whirl, see how she does. We'll take them inside now and we'll finish up for the day. We'll put them on the stove top. get them nice and warm, and let's see if we can get them to work. And until next time, thanks for spending some time here watching. If you want me to do a more in-depth, closer in description on how to build one of these, let me know in the comments below. I'll take some time and I'll do with some closer up video work so you can see exactly what I'm doing. And so let me know. Happy to do that, and always looking forward to building another one of these. These are cool. They're great little gifts to give away too. Now the materials I've used with the computer CPUs and the peltiers and the blades, you can usually get those parts for kind of like around and under 50 bucks. A lot cheaper than spending 100 odd on a new one. Plus they look a little cooler and funkier too, a little more personal. And so remember to like and subscribe below. Thanks for joining me here today. It's Andrew from Too Many Projects, Not Enough Time. And yes, we've ticked another project off the list as far as getting this one repaired and hopefully going. We'll find out when we put it on the stove, and a new one for the shop. So we'll see you next time.